My name is Dr. Lori Conway. I'm a cardiovascular and thoracic surgeon with over 3 decades of clinical experience. I have been inside more human chests than most people could imagine. I have held failing hearts in my hands. I have repaired arteries so damaged they no longer resembled what a healthy blood vessel is supposed to look like. And I am here to tell you something that most physicians simply do not make time to explain during a routine appointment. There are 5 everyday foods that undergo a genuine chemical transformation when you reheat them. Not a minor change, a fundamental one. And the compounds produced during that transformation do not just irritate your stomach. They quietly attack your blood vessels, promote inflammation deep inside your body, and create conditions in which your own cells become more likely to mutate in dangerous directions. If you are over 60, this information is not just interesting, it is urgent.
And by the end of what I am about to share with you, the way you look at your leftovers will never be quite the same again. Before we talk about specific foods, I want to spend a moment explaining why age changes everything in this conversation. Because the honest truth is that some of what I'm about to describe would cause minimal long-term harm in a 25-year-old body. The same exposure in a 65-year-old body is a fundamentally different story. Think of your body's internal defense system like a security team. When you are young, that team is fully staffed, alert, well-rested, and working in perfect coordination. Toxins come in, the team neutralizes them. A rogue cell starts behaving strangely, the team identifies it and shuts it down. Inflammation flares up somewhere, the team manages it, resolves it, and moves on. Everything happens quietly and efficiently in the background. You never notice it because it is working exactly the way it should. Now imagine that same security team 25, 30 years later. Still working, still trying, but not at full capacity. Some members have retired, others are slower, response times have increased, and the threats that used to be neutralized before they could cause any real damage now sometimes slip through. They stay in circulation longer, they accumulate, they compound. What was once a minor chemical insult that your body handled without any fuss has now become something your body struggles to fully resolve. This is what happens after 60 with inflammation specifically. Chronic, low-grade, persistent inflammation. Not the sharp, purposeful inflammation of healing a wound or fighting an infection. This is the slow-burning, never quite extinguished kind. The kind that damages the delicate inner lining of your arteries over time. The kind that creates the chemical environment in which healthy cells are more likely to develop the kind of genetic errors that lead to serious illness. And the kind that most people feel as fatigue, stiffness, and brain fog long before they ever learn what is actually causing it. The 5 foods we are about to discuss all share one critical characteristic. Under heat, specifically reheating heat, they generate compounds that pour fuel directly onto that already burning inflammatory fire. And in a body over 60, that fire has much less standing between it and real damage. Let's begin with something you have almost certainly got sitting in your refrigerator right now: fried food. Whether it came from your own kitchen or a restaurant, anything that was cooked in vegetable oil, including sunflower oil, corn oil, soybean oil, or canola oil, undergoes a specific and well-documented chemical process when it is heated a second time. Here is what happens at a molecular level. These vegetable oils are rich in polyunsaturated fats, which is actually part of why they have been marketed to us as heart-healthy alternatives for so long. But polyunsaturated fats have a critical weakness. They are extremely unstable under repeated heat exposure. When you reheat oil that has already been cooked once, a process called lipid oxidation kicks into a much higher gear. The fat molecules break down, and in that breakdown, they release a class of compounds called aldehydes. Now, aldehydes are not a minor irritant. They are the same category of chemical compound found in cigarette smoke. That is not a comparison I make for dramatic effect. That is organic chemistry. And what do aldehydes do inside your arterial walls? They trigger oxidative stress, which is essentially a state of cellular damage caused by an imbalance between harmful free radicals and your body's ability to neutralize them. The inner lining of your blood vessels, called the endothelium, takes the brunt of this. It becomes inflamed. It loses the smooth, flexible quality that healthy arteries need to regulate blood pressure and blood flow. Over time, those walls stiffen. they thicken, and the stage is set for cardiovascular disease. But there is a second mechanism here that goes beyond your heart. Free radicals also interact directly with DNA inside your cells. In most cases, your cellular repair systems catch this damage and fix it. But after 60, that repair process slows significantly. Some of the damaged DNA gets through, mutations accumulate, and it is precisely that kind of accumulated mutation that represents the earliest steps in how serious cellular illness begins. You do not have to eliminate fried food entirely, but reheating it, especially in a microwave or by adding more hot oil, dramatically amplifies the chemical damage that was already present in the food. If you have leftovers, use an oven or an air fryer at moderate temperature with no added oil, or eat it cold. Those two options are meaningfully safer. This one surprises almost everyone, and I understand why. Leafy greens, spinach, kale, Swiss chard are among the most consistently recommended foods in cardiovascular and cancer prevention research. Eating more of them is almost universally good advice. So how does a food this beneficial end up on a warning list? The answer lies in a process that begins the moment the cooking stops. Raw, leafy greens naturally contain nitrates. Your body handles those nitrates quite well in their original form. They are part of a normal dietary chain and, in the right amounts, can actually support healthy blood vessel function. The problem begins after cooking. As the cooked greens cool and sit, bacteria that survive the cooking process begin converting those harmless nitrates into nitrites. This conversion is gradual at room temperature, but it begins almost immediately and accelerates the longer the food sits out before refrigeration. At this stage, the situation is still relatively manageable, but then comes the reheating. When you apply heat to greens that have already gone through this nitrate to nitrite conversion, a secondary chemical reaction occurs. The nitrites react with the amino acids in the food, the building blocks of protein, and produce a class of compounds called nitrosamines. This is where the conversation shifts from inconvenient to genuinely serious. Nitrosamines are classified by the World Health Organization as probable human carcinogens. The evidence links them most strongly to cancers of the stomach, esophagus, and colon, but the damage does not stop at cancer risk. Nitrosamines are also potent drivers of vascular inflammation. They target the endothelium directly, the same tissue that reheated oils attack through a completely different chemical pathway. When that inner lining is under assault from multiple directions simultaneously, your arteries lose their ability to respond normally to changes in blood pressure and blood flow. Clot risk increases. Blood pressure becomes harder to manage. And for someone over 60 who may already be managing early-stage arterial stiffening, this compounds a problem that was already present. The solution is elegantly simple. Cook only the amount of leafy greens you plan to eat in that sitting. Anything left over goes directly into the refrigerator and is eaten cold the following day, added to a salad or a grain bowl. Never microwaved, never pan-heated again. And if your cooked greens are sitting on the counter while you finish preparing the rest of your meal, try to get them into the fridge within 30 minutes of them coming off the heat. Rice is the kind of food that feels impossible to associate with danger. It is plain, it is gentle, it has been feeding civilizations for thousands of years. And yet, among food safety researchers, reheated rice is one of the most consistently flagged sources of foodborne illness in the world. Here is why, and here is why it matters beyond just an upset stomach. There is a bacterium called Bacillus cereus that is naturally present in raw rice. Cooking kills the bacteria themselves, but what cooking cannot kill are the spores. Bacterial spores are essentially survival capsules that the bacteria produce when conditions become threatening. They shut down metabolic activity completely, go into a dormant state, and wait. Boiling water does not destroy them. When the rice cools after cooking, those spores wake up. And in the temperature range between 50 and around 120 degrees Fahrenheit, which is exactly where cooling rice spends a significant amount of time, they begin multiplying at a remarkable rate. Here's the piece that most people do not know. Reheating kills the new bacteria that have grown, but it does not deactivate the toxins those bacteria have already secreted into the rice. Bacillus cereus produces heat-stable toxins, meaning they survive temperatures that destroy virtually everything else. You can steam that rice until it is scorching hot, and those toxins remain intact, fully active, ready to cause damage the moment they enter your digestive system. In the short term, the result is nausea and gastrointestinal distress, unpleasant but typically manageable. The more significant concern is what happens when this exposure is repeated regularly over months and years. Chronic low-level bacterial toxin exposure drives persistent intestinal inflammation, and your gut does not exist in isolation from the rest of your body. The gut and the cardiovascular system are connected through multiple overlapping pathways, including the bloodstream itself, which carries inflammatory signals throughout the body, and the gut microbiome, which directly influences cholesterol metabolism and blood pressure regulation. After 60, the lining of your gut becomes more permeable. Toxins and inflammatory signals that a younger gut would have filtered out more effectively now pass through more easily into systemic circulation. I have seen patients with progressive cardiovascular inflammation and no obvious dietary explanation. When we looked closely at their daily habits, rice, reheated rice, consumed repeatedly throughout the week, kept appearing as a common thread. The fix is not complicated, but timing is everything. Get cooked rice into the refrigerator within 1 hour of finishing cooking. Use it within 24 hours. When you reheat it, do it once, thoroughly, and do not reheat it again. Better still, learn to cook smaller amounts so there is less left over. Chicken has become one of the most popular proteins for people over 60 for entirely good reasons. It is lean, it is versatile, it is widely available, and it adapts to almost any flavor profile. Cooking it in bulk and using it throughout the week seems like exactly the kind of smart, health-conscious meal planning that we should all be doing. The problem is not the chicken itself. The problem is what happens when a microwave becomes your primary reheating method. Microwave ovens heat food by agitating water molecules using electromagnetic radiation. The critical limitation is that this agitation does not happen evenly. The energy penetrates food in inconsistent patterns, creating zones within your chicken breast or thigh, where heat concentration is significantly lower than in surrounding areas. These cold zones are invisible. You cannot see them. The surface of your chicken looks done. Steam is rising from the plate, but inside, pockets of food may never have reached a temperature high enough to kill the bacteria that can cause serious harm. The specific pathogens of concern here are Salmonella, Campylobacter, and Listeria. Campylobacter is particularly resilient and can survive temperatures that eliminate most other foodborne bacteria. Listeria is the one I am most concerned about in patients over 60 because it is disproportionately dangerous in people whose immune systems are not operating at peak capacity. And that includes almost everyone in this age group to some degree, because immune function naturally declines with age. One episode of food poisoning from reheated chicken is a bad experience. Repeated low-level bacterial exposure that your body mostly fights off but never fully resolves is something quite different. Each time your immune system mobilizes a response to bacterial toxins, it releases inflammatory molecules called cytokines into the bloodstream. A single episode of this is entirely normal, but if this immune activation is happening regularly, those cytokines are in near constant circulation. And cytokines circulating chronically do exactly what all the other compounds we have discussed do. They inflame arterial walls, they promote the kind of plaque formation that leads to coronary artery disease, and they make your blood more prone to forming dangerous clots. Your best options with leftover chicken are the oven with the meat covered in foil at a moderate temperature, or eating it cold. If you genuinely need to use the microwave, cut the chicken into small, uniform pieces to reduce the size and depth of cold zones, and let it rest for 2 full minutes after the heating cycle ends. The resting period allows residual heat to redistribute and finish the job the microwave started unevenly. Potatoes present a unique situation on this list because the concern with reheating them operates on 2 separate biological tracks simultaneously, one related to cancer risk and one related directly to cardiovascular stress. Understanding both helps explain why this otherwise humble vegetable deserves to be treated with more care. The first track involves a compound called acrylamide. When starchy foods are cooked at high temperatures, a chemical reaction occurs between a naturally occurring amino acid and reducing sugars within the food. The product of this reaction is acrylamide, which the International Agency for Research on Cancer has classified as a probable human carcinogen, with the most consistent evidence linking it to kidney cancer. The critical point is this: acrylamide forms the first time you cook a potato. When you reheat it at high temperature, additional acrylamide forms on top of what was already there. You you are stacking exposure. And because the body's detoxification pathways become less efficient after 60, the same dose of acrylamide does meaningfully more damage in an older body than it would in a younger one. The second track is about what reheating does to the starch structure inside the potato itself. When starchy foods are cooked and then cooled completely, a portion of their starch undergoes a structural transformation into what is called resistant starch. Resistant starch behaves less like a carbohydrate and more like dietary fiber. It passes through your small intestine without being absorbed, feeds beneficial bacteria in your large intestine, and slows the overall rate at which glucose enters your bloodstream. For blood sugar management, this is genuinely beneficial. But when you reheat that potato, the resistant starch converts back into regular digestible starch, and regular starch digests rapidly. The glucose floods your bloodstream quickly. Your pancreas has to respond with a sharp insulin release to manage that spike. For someone over 60, particularly anyone with any degree of insulin resistance, which is extraordinarily common in this age group, that rapid cycle of blood sugar spike and insulin surge is not a neutral event. It generates oxidative stress directly within your blood vessel walls. It accelerates arterial stiffening. It contributes to the progression of cardiovascular disease in ways that operate completely separately from cholesterol or sodium intake. So, a reheated potato is simultaneously increasing your acrylamide exposure and creating a cardiovascular stress response through blood sugar dysregulation. The practical solution is to embrace the cold potato. A potato salad made with olive oil, lemon, fresh herbs, and eaten at room temperature or cold keeps the resistant starch intact, keeps blood sugar stable, and avoids additional acrylamide formation entirely. If you genuinely need your potato warm, cook a fresh one at lower heat for a shorter time rather than reheating one that has been sitting. I want to step back from the individual foods for a moment and talk about what these 5 things have in common, because understanding the shared mechanism is more important than any single swap you make in your kitchen. Every food we have discussed today feeds the same underlying process when reheated and consumed repeatedly. Chronic systemic inflammation, not the purposeful healing kind, the slow, persistent, never fully resolved kind that over the span of months and years erodes the structural integrity of your arteries, disrupts your body's ability to regulate its own cellular behavior, and creates the biological conditions that precede both serious cardiovascular disease and cellular illness. These 2 outcomes are not as separate as most people assume. They share common roots. And those roots are deeply, consistently connected to what chronic inflammation does to the body over time. In my operating room, I have seen both, more times than I would like to count. And the pattern I keep observing is not the dramatic lifestyle of someone who made obvious choices that harmed their health. It is the patient who cooked at home, who tried to eat well, who lived what they believed was a careful and health-conscious life, but who, unknowingly, repeated specific kitchen habits that quietly kept the inflammatory fire burning year after year. The 5 changes I'm describing today are not about restriction or sacrifice. You do not have to give up fried food, leafy greens, rice, chicken, or potatoes. You simply have to change how you handle them after the initial cooking. Eat fried food cold or reheat it gently without added oil. Cook leafy greens fresh and eat them immediately. Cool rice rapidly and use it within 24 hours. Reheat chicken in an oven rather than a microwave, or eat it cold. Embrace the cold potato as one of the smartest things you can put on your plate. These are not burdens. They are small adjustments in timing and temperature that, compounded over weeks and months, meaningfully reduce the inflammatory load your body is carrying every day. After 30 years in medicine, what I believe most strongly is this: the body has a remarkable capacity to recover when you stop working against it. Inflammation is not permanent. Arterial function can improve. The processes we have been discussing today can be slowed, and in many cases partially reversed, with consistent, sustainable changes. But they require you to know what you are actually doing, which is exactly why I wanted to have this conversation. The kitchen is one of the most powerful places in your life for protecting your long-term health, and now you know how to use it more wisely. If there is someone in your life over 60 who reheats these foods regularly without knowing the risks, share this with them, not to frighten them, to give them what you now have: information before the consequences of not having it become something much harder to reverse. This content is intended for general educational purposes only and does not constitute personalized medical advice. Please consult your physician or qualified healthcare provider before making any changes to your diet or health routine.